Securing enterprise content at scale requires managing SharePoint permissions across thousands of sites, document libraries, and individual folders. The traditional audit method relies on an administrator manually opening every site and inspecting library settings. For an enterprise, this manual approach is too slow and produces inconsistent results. Standard permission exports often fail to provide the necessary depth. Using basic tools creates dangerous blind spots for security teams. These exports frequently overlook deep group memberships and misrepresent whether a specific library has broken its permission inheritance. Effective access governance requires moving away from static snapshots. The true solution is a highly repeatable, automated pipeline that systematically uncovers the exact source of every assigned permission. This pipeline relies on 3 technologies: Power Automate, the SharePoint REST API, and Microsoft Graph. Building for an enterprise environment requires a scalable, error-resilient orchestration layer capable of parsing complex site structures. The high-level pipeline follows a strict sequence: reading configuration, connecting to targets, extracting metadata, and normalizing the results. This programmatic approach replaces manual clicks with automated data normalization and identity expansion. Following this structural blueprint ultimately transforms disjointed, chaotic audits into a powerful, unified governance engine that scales endlessly. Enterprise solutions cannot rely on hard-coded target URLs. They require a centralized configuration source to manage the scan targets. A SharePoint configuration list acts as the central brain. It allows administrators to govern, filter, and audit which resources are scanned without modifying the flow logic. This list must include specific columns to dictate the flow's behavior, such as the site URL and Boolean toggles for include inherited and expand entry groups. The orchestration flow reads this list using OData filters to pull only the records marked as active. A validation stage follows, checking for invalid site targets or duplicate URLs before any processing begins. During execution, loop concurrency must be carefully managed. High concurrency will trigger system throttling, stalling the entire audit. This dynamic configuration layer ensures the engine scales safely and adaptively without constant maintenance. Standard Power Automate connectors cannot retrieve the deep permission data required for a compliance audit. We bypass these limitations using the Send an HTTP request to SharePoint action to access the SharePoint REST API directly. The first API call retrieves the library's metadata. We specifically look for a Boolean property called has unique role assignments. This property is essential. It provides the definitive indicator of whether a library has broken permission inheritance. A second call to the role assignments endpoint extracts the principal types and their specific permission levels. Because a single assignment can contain multiple role definitions, the flow must loop through these nested arrays to join the results into a single string. This process often reveals limited access entries, which are frequently misunderstood. Deleting these entries compromises the audit trail. SharePoint uses limited access to facilitate item-level sharing. Excluding it hides those sharing exceptions. Parsing the REST API directly ensures we capture the exact inheritance state and granular exceptions required for compliance. Role assignments often point to opaque groups rather than individual users. To reveal who actually has access, we use branching logic. For standard SharePoint groups, the flow uses the principal ID and the site user's endpoint to expand the membership. The final report must preserve both the original group name and the individual user row to maintain the context of how access was granted. SharePoint API calls cannot expand Microsoft Entra security groups. This requires a different approach. We build a bridge to Microsoft Graph using the transitive members operation to unpack deeply nested group layers. To maintain performance across high volumes, the engine caches group memberships in memory. This prevents redundant, rate-limiting API calls for the same groups. Bridging SharePoint with Microsoft Graph is the only viable method to reveal the true human identities behind enterprise security layers. When scanning hundreds of sites, individual timeouts and system failures are simply a reality of navigating complex enterprise infrastructure. The process remains stable by using a try, catch, and finally scope architecture within Tower Automate. The catch block traps throttling errors and log failures without stopping the entire audit. To avoid exacerbating throttling, the flow must respect retry after headers rather than using aggressive retry loops. Data output also requires careful design. Excel Online should not be used as the live transactional database during the loop. Excel has strict limitations, including write locks and a 25 megabyte file size limit. We use a staging list or dataverse table to collect the data first. This two-step architecture successfully separates the massive transaction layer from the final presentation layer. A resilient system manages failures and data limits, ensuring partial results are logged rather than losing hours of work to a single error. We have orchestrated these APIs into a repeatable access intelligence engine. With this data highly normalized, we can apply logic-based rules to evaluate access automatically. This allows us to flag external users with full control or identify anonymous sharing links on sensitive libraries. Transparency regarding the system's limits is essential for a credible security posture. A library role assignment report is not a complete effective access report. It may miss conditional access policies or individual file sharing exceptions. The system can be configured to scan at the granular item level, but doing so significantly increases the volume of REST requests and the run duration. By bridging these powerful APIs together, Power Automate successfully operates as the orchestration layer for a mature access governance system. True security isn't found in a simple data export. It is the result of architecting visibility out of complexity.